I'm Jane Tyler. As Eugenia mentioned earlier, I was here at the Casa for many years and really miss all of you, and it's great to be back for this evening, especially in light of the wonderful film we just saw. We're very lucky to have both directors here to engage us on this question of travel and / versus tourism. And just also to be thinking, I mean, I think the thing that struck me the most was just the kind of contrast that one feels as an American between our own lives, which are constantly in motion, rarely rooted to one place, and seeing, you know, the 4 generations seated at the dinner table, as we just saw in the last part of the film, or thinking about the 7 generations that, you know, ran a farm, and how do we find that rootedness here in America? And little wonder that we crave going to places like Montalcino or Montepulciano or Siena, where there is this sense, or at least we think there's a sense, among some families there still is that sense of continuity. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you tonight and with this fabulous group. And to avoid having me get up and down and, you know, ruining the show for everyone else, I thought I would just introduce everyone at once. And then at the end, we'll have some time to discuss among ourselves and to take questions from all of you. So we're going to begin with Roberto Bechi, who you've already briefly met on the stage. As he already mentioned, a proud native of Siena with very deep Tuscan roots. We've seen how deep those roots go in the film. He is, not surprisingly, a tour guide and a very passionate ambassador for his region's history, culture, and traditions. He is formerly a restaurant owner, something we didn't know from the film, and now dedicates his life to offering what he calls immersive experiences as a professional driver and storyteller as he blends his love of history with local insights. He's known, and I'm guessing we will soon have an example of this in a few minutes, known for his charm, humor, and endless curiosity, and obviously delights in sharing Tuscany's art and culture. So. My wife that told you that. I don't know who wrote this, but in any case, we'll be hearing from him very shortly on Sienese society and culture. Following Roberto, someone you've also already met, and all of you know who he is, Eugenio Refini, professor and chair of Italian here at NYU. I could go on endlessly about his many accomplishments as a scholar. I won't, because you already know them. I will say, or reiterate, that like Roberto, like the 2 Robertos here tonight, Eugenio is from Siena. And in addition to being a fabulous scholar of the Renaissance, someone who has had more grants than we can count on both hands, places like the American Academy, the Warburg Institute, and so forth, he's also a great tour guide, which I happened to discover this summer. I was in charge of running a program for some wonderful Yale alumni, 3 of whom are here tonight with us, which is just great to see them again. And Eugenio kindly offered, as a Sienese, to kick off our 3-week program with a visit to a church in his own contrada of Val di Montone, and then a tour of his beloved city. So to all of Eugenio's many credits on his CV, you have to now add, really terrific tour guide. And Eugenio will be talking to us about his town, medieval Siena, between word and image. Following Eugenio, we'll have Roberto Guigiani, who is a professor of tourism sciences at Fondazione Campus, which I believe is in Lucca. Is that
yes,
where you're based?
University of Pisa, but the foundation
is in Lucca. Great, so connected to the University of Pisa. Like Eugenio and like the other Roberto, this Roberto was born in Siena and has over 25 years of experience in the tourism industry. Throughout his career, he's had many roles: journalist, travel agent, tour operator, event organizer, director of the Pisa Tourism Agency, and hotel director. And it's really great that he can be with us tonight to talk about what he calls the impact of tourism and changes over time. Next, we'll have Patricia, or Patty Camarota, who is a Boston-based social media, content, and influencer marketing strategist with a passion for driving meaningful impact. She has experiences at MediaCause, Cosmopolitan Magazine, and Review.com, and has led award-winning campaigns for nonprofits and major media brands. Beyond her professional achievements, and this will make us think of the film, she also is a devoted foodie, often found cooking, exploring, or savoring delicious meals. And I'm guessing, Patty, that you have Italian roots as well, and we'll hope to hear more about them. And Patty will be talking about studying abroad in Siena as an American, something I've already just brought up. Finally, we'll have a few words, I think, at the end, Brian, if you're so moved, to be speaking to us again about your film. And I'll just very briefly introduce Brian again. He's a renowned producer and manager who has represented award-winning directors, choreographers, composers, artists, singers, dancers, and so forth. And he's collaborated with artist management and production companies, as well as record labels on tours, films, TV, and music videos. Brian's co-produced instructional videos, and he's the author-producer of the dance drama called Dancer in the Wings, and of course, the director, as we've just seen, of Tuscany Beyond Expectations. So I'll sit down, turn the mic over to this Roberto, and we will hear from our three native Sienese, and Patty and Brian about tourism, travel, Siena, and many other things. Roberto.
Okay, so thank you. Eugenio, mi dici dov'è il... per far vedere la... Okay. All right. Can you... Yes, if you move a little bit, that's where... Yeah. Okay, non mi serve. Perfetto. There's nothing worse for a short guy to have something like this. This is absolutely nothing. Well, what can I say? I was lucky. I had two lucky things in my life. Very lucky. One, I was born in Siena. And why? Why I was lucky? Because I didn't have to go to school to learn what the beauty was. I was born there. I often tell the young people in my city, if you don't know beauty and you're ignorant, it's your choice, because it was all around you. And I'm not talking just about Siena, I'm talking about the surrounding of Siena as well, the whole territory. It's amazing. Second luck in my life, I married an American woman. And after several generations, I guess, my cousins start to look good. So, no, I'm just kidding. Obviously, it's a bad joke. But I married a foreigner, and that opened my mind in many ways. Not just my heart. Obviously, I fall in love with her. But I travel. I travel because of her. And I learn a language, the one that poorly I am expressing today to you, the English. And with that, I learn another culture. And then I started to think, the people in the past, they wrote a beautiful page of history, they travel. Traveling is the only money that you spend that make you richer. The mind, Einstein said, the mind is like a parachute. It works only if you open it. So I started to open my mind, and then open my heart to different culture. And I try to absorb these cultures. Just like the Italians, they wrote the beautiful pages in the 14th century that some of you may already have seen it at the Met. It's called Siena, the Rise of Painting. I hope you did. You have a few days if you didn't to see it. These were not just fabulous painters. They were first travelers. They were all around Europe at that time, and from each part of Europe they learned something. And then it was their time to influence other cultures as well. So this is Italy, you know the boot. And you see Siena over there. And you see this is a map from the 14th century when Italy was just born. Let me explain to you. It was Professor Eugenio would tell you, it was Boccaccio, if I am not wrong, Eugenio, that for the first time in a novel said there were many Venetians, Sicilians, people from Genoa, and other Italians. And so basically that was the first time the word Italians was used. Not as a country, as a civilization. A beautiful mosaic of beautiful culture. And each of these tessera created the most amazing, beautiful culture that today we call Italian. But once upon a time, we were all Tuscans, Sicilians, we were all different people. We spoke different languages, but we managed to understand each other. During the Roman period in Italy, there were 12 million people living. Somebody speculated. After Roman Empire collapsed, 4.5 million. So imagine what you call it the Dark Age, what impact had on Italy. And after the barbarian waves, we all know that Charlemagne came and united the Roman Empire, called Holy Roman Empire. And from the ashes of the Dark Age was born a new era. Now, often my customer, mostly Americans, they come in Italy and they have an idea of the Middle Age, thinking about queens, kings, knights, challenge. Well, it's partially true in Italy. Most in Italy were republics. Venice was the first republic. Then you had Pisa, you had Genoa, you had Amalfi. These were powerful republics. They basically own the highway, US 66, Route 66, which at the time was the Mediterranean Sea. And they did commerce. And with commerce, what you do? First you buy something, then you copy it, and then you develop it. That's how history is played, in a way. And through that, Siena was born, because Siena had the only road that connected Rome to North Europe. It's called Francigena if you go north, in the way to France. It's called Romea if you go south. And so there was the first, let's say, unquote, paved road after the Roman roads were all flooded and all. They allowed also the inland part of Italy develop. And Siena already was a republic in the 13th century. Venice was a republic in the 7th century. Imagine that. And by the way, in case you didn't know, the reason why you have a Palladio architecture in every building here in New York, everywhere, is because the only republic remaining when you were became a country was Venice in whole Europe. So you had the idea of the Republic of Venice in many ways. What I can say is that with the next slide over here, if I manage, over here, you know this beautiful square, some of you will know. This is the main square of Siena. It's called Piazza del Campo. Campo means a field. Used to be outside of the city wall of Siena. Siena was a small village. It certainly did not dream it to become the city that you will see later. But later on, when the city hall managed to rule the city, you can see what they did. They did the Palazzo Pubblico, the city hall. And that tower is very important. Often when you go in the city in Italy, the tower is in the middle of the building, defending the four corners of the building. In Siena, no. This is the declination of independence from the Pope and from the Emperor. Is starting the rise, not just a painting, is the rise of a humanism, is the rise of the modern life that we have today, based on the republics, not in monarchies. Everybody knows this is the famous race where the horse race called Il Palio is, but I'm not going to talk about the Palio today. I'm going to talk about something else. This is the Cathedral of Siena. A beautiful, everybody knows inside there is a Michelangelo work, Pinturicchio, Nicola Giovanni Pisano, Bernini, you name it, in a way. But the cathedral has something particular. In front of the cathedral, as you can see, there is a hospital. And this is a hospital that is 1,000 years old. Was the wealthiest institution in Siena. And I would like to stop a little bit here to tell you that this was the first welfare in the Middle Age ever done. It was not just a hospital. It was actually taken from the church by the city hall and administered by a director, which was nominated by the city hall. And what they did is, if you are an elderly people in Siena in the Middle Age, the hospital will offer you to have you stay in the hospital for the rest of your life, as long as you left your building to the hospital, which would be, however, rented to young couples that would come in the city, and with the revenue from the rent, you supported the elderly person for the rest of their life. It's the first retirement home, if you think about it, right? But the hospital did something else. You remember the Francigena Road, today is the Jubilee, this is the year of the Jubilee. Imagine how many pilgrims passed through Siena. And usually what they did, they left some money in every church as a deposit. So if a bandit attacked them and stole all their money, That's what they did. They could go back, step back, get the money, and go back home. The hospital did something else. The hospital did a portrait of you if you left your money there. And they give you a receipt. If a bandit torture you, you will never know how you were representing the portrait. So in a way, the first certified check, if you wish. It was very clever. But even more important, and that's what really gets me, is this one here, is an orphanage. Basically, if your wife died giving birth, you had nobody that could attend to the baby, especially give them the necessary milk. Over here, on the left side of this building, there used to be a spinning wheel. Half of the wheel was going inside the building, half was outside. You left your baby there, you spin the wheel, and on the other side, in a very anonymous way, and a wet nurse would take the baby and pay by the city hall, by the way. And then, if you want the baby back, you left him with a necklace. And the little necklace will have a half coin. You kept the other half. If you want the baby back, that's how you did it. You just showed them the other half coin, and the baby will give it back to you. If you didn't have the baby back, you didn't want, the baby back, that's what you did. You left the baby, and the wet nurse will feed the baby, and then they will expose her for adoption. If you were never adopted, the hospital will adopt you. By the way, all that I'm saying is very well described inside the hospital in frescoes, so you can see the whole story. Beautiful museum. Unfortunately, very few people go there, but it's amazing, really amazing. And if you're adopted by the hospital, you get the last name from the hospital. For example, all the Tuscan people called innocenti, innocents, they were all orphans. In America, you have a lot of people from Naples. They migrated here. The third most common last name in Italy, you call it Esposito. I know, you misspell it. Okay, you mispronounce it, sorry. It's called Esposito in Italian. Esposo for adoption. Or in Rome, Proietti, same last name. They were all orphans. So we took care of the elderly people, we took care of the babies, and all the pilgrims, which, by the way, they receive a piece of bread for free. Who gives you anything for free today when you go in a city? The bread was stamped, so you could not resell it. It was given bread. I would say that this society of the early 14th century was very progressive. Wouldn't you say that? Yes. All right. I remember that we are in the time where in England, they didn't know yet if they were going to speak English or French. Just to give you a perspective of what happened around us. Inside the cathedral, there is something that really strikes me. The rise of painting doesn't cover much sculpturing, but this is a beautiful pulpit by Nicola Giovanni Pisano. Now, Nicola Pisano was born in Apulia, in South Italy, probably very close to the Appia Way. You can imagine how many medieval people, just doing road constructions or something, they found Roman tombs. The Roman aristocrats were burying their people along the roads. And so this is a pulpit, but if you look carefully, it's kind of a copy of sarcophagus, of a Roman sarcophagus. So it's already classical, but we are in 1265. And what amazed me about this is the Last Judgment. Look at the people's faces over here. They are full of terror. You have to wait for Giotto, and later on for Leonardo da Vinci to see the psychological element of the people having terror. Is a humanism. Look at this one over here. The crucifixion. Obviously, we are so used to see a crucifixion today. But this is only 30 years after the first crucifixion was ever done. Before, Jesus was on the cross, but triumphant. He was alive, defeating death. Over here is a man. And if you look on the bottom of the feet of Jesus, you see a little grotto. And inside there is a skull. That's a skull of Adam. When Adam died, the medieval people thought that his son was ascended to paradise to get the oil that it was necessary to forgive Adam, and instead God gave them 3 seeds. And these 3 seeds gave birth to a tree. And this tree is what the Romans used to build the cross where Jesus was crucified. So it's the symbol of redemption. Look on your right, my left, you see the Virgin Mary that fainted. We are in 1265. The Virgin Mary is now in a throne. It's not the Byzantine Virgin Mary with the baby on her lap. It's a sign of humanism. Who will not faint to see his child dying, even if somebody predicted that he will? I don't want to bore you with this, but this is very important. Look at the baby Jesus. Baby Jesus is on the right side, on the lap of the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary is pretty classical looking. But look at the Magi. The Magi comes and he's kissing the foot of baby Jesus. Now, baby Jesus is laughing because he's tickled. He's not blessing everybody, right? He's tickled. He's a baby. Over here, outside of the cathedral, what you see. Look at the man on the left, on the bottom. Your right, sorry. Your right to my left. You see the guy with the beard? That was done in 1295, and that's Plato. Plato in late 13th century. Didn't we study there was the Neoplatonic movement in the Renaissance that did rediscover Plato? No. This is Plato. Plato in a cathedral, the Pope will never agree with that. Any tyrant, and I'm going to say the Pope is a tyrant. I'm just saying at that time it was a king, it was a monarch, would not accept philosophy, because philosophy is telling you that you have to ask yourself questions, right? That's dangerous, right? For a tyrant or a king to let you do that. So that's Plato. Over here, the guy on my right, your left, with a beard is Aristotle. The woman in the center, inside the niche, is a Marion of Moses. It was also sculptured by the son of Nicola Pisano, Giovanni Pisano. And Giovanni Pisano represented her. You see that she's talking to somebody, right, on your right. And 200 years after, Michelangelo passed by there, after doing in Rome the Pietà, he was commissioned to make statues inside the Cathedral of Siena. And when he saw that, he said, I like that. That movement that she's doing with the knee is called contrapposto. You have to wait for Michelangelo to do it again inside the Cathedral of Siena with St. Paul, and then with David in Florence. So imagine that. What stopped this movement is the plague. Because we had ports. We had Messina port. We had the Sicilian port. And that's where the plague came from, in a way, which devastated, killed half of the population in Siena, talking about 1347, 1348. That's when it happened. Over here, we have something else. We are moving back to the city hall. This is the first illustrated constitution of Siena. Costituto, which is not a real constitution. But the people that lived in a city, obviously moving inside what was at that time a big city. Siena was 40,000 people in the 13th century. You can imagine. The biggest city in Europe was Milan with 120,000 people. So it was a pretty good-sized city. And when you have a lot of people, a lot of social classes, you need to give yourself some rules. And this is the first vulgar Italian written, not in Latin, Costituto, they give the rules how you govern the city. And the city of Siena was governed by 9 people, which were chosen among the council, and they were in charge only for 2 months. Only for 2 months. Then you have to call other people to rule. So then nobody could become a dictator. And when you have a constitution, let's call it constitution, if it was not a real constitution like we have today, you need to have the Supreme Court. And Siena, like many republics, gave themselves the podestà, which was a juridical figure who had to live inside the city hall in the courthouse for a whole year without being able to see anybody. So he would be a fair judge. You can imagine that. And then if you had something, it was an oligarchy, it was not democracy, don't get me wrong. But if you had to vote for a law, a regulation, or whatever, the council would say yes or no, putting their vote inside a little pallotta, it's called, from where come the word ballots, basically. If you have a problem, you can go to the main square of Siena and present your problem to the government on Thursday, and on Monday they had to answer. No way today. No way. Talking about art, now we are going, obviously, to what the Met very beautifully represented, the 14th century art of Siena. Over here, with the Pietro Lorenzetti, we start to see not just the Virgin Mary on the throne, but we start to see the homes of people. You enter inside. This is very interesting because it's like having a camera and you are a director of a movie and you just show what is inside. You see that? So we are starting to be more familiar with not perspective, because this is not perspective, but it's a tentative to show your perspective. Very well done by Pietro Lorenzetti. Over here, one of my favorite things to the Uffizi. Still Pietro Lorenzetti, presentation of the temple, baby Jesus is sucking his finger. Tell me if it's not cute. That's cute. That's cute. Over here, the Virgin Mary. Now, I don't want to be blasphemic, but think about this. You are 15, okay? You have to marry an old man. And then a young man with the wings come, and it says, an angel, and it says, you're pregnant. And you have a baby in your belly, which is not just a regular baby, it's actually the Son of God. And you have to tell your husband that the next day. That's what the Virgin Mary does, says, let me think about it. I know, I don't want to be blasphemy, but that's what it is. It's a human reaction, right? It's not the Virgin Mary accepting immediately the thing. He says, I'm scared. You are telling me something like that? I'm 15, right? It's beautiful. This is Simone Martini, which was a jeweler, an amazing artist. You should go to see. This is the Uffizi. This is something that my friend Roberto will cover later, but this is absolutely amazing propaganda, is the effect of good government and bad government. If you go to the City Hall of Siena, this is a must. And obviously I will let Roberto explain to you better in details how this is a unique piece by Ambrogio Lorenzetti, the brother of Pietro, the one I'll show you first. And you can see the city full of goods, prosperity, and everything. I want to make it short. This is a bad government, the effect of good bad government. This is an Aristotelical idea that you cannot have prosperity unless you have a social justice. And that's another very progressive thought for something done in the middle of the 14th century. Another important piece that you can see at the Met is not this. This is the Basilica dell'Osservanza, just outside of Siena. This is an old picture, the only picture I found of this basilica bombed by the Americans during the Second War. Now, don't get me wrong, you were not bad people. You didn't want to bomb the basilica. What happened, you wanted to bomb the train station, but you miss it. That's because during the Second War, we had the very intelligent people with stupid bombs. Now we have stupid people with smart bombs, but that's a different story. I'm just saying. Sorry, sometimes I forget that I'm a guy, not a comedian, but that's what it is. So they kill some of the monks, but most important, they burn a piece of art by Lando di Pietro. Lando di Pietro is not a famous artist in art history, but he's the one that did, as an architect, did the expansion of the Cathedral of Siena, which was never finished because the plague came and the building was not stable. And so they never finished the expansion. We have to make a cathedral bigger than the one in Florence, but you know the rivalry. So, we had to be bigger than Florence. And what happened, he, inside this basilica, he had a beautiful crucifix, 2 yards wide and 2 yards tall, that he sculptured in wood. So he was an architect and a sculptor and a jeweler. We call them a Renaissance man, but he's from the 14th century. And that's what you see at the Met. That's what they found. The only thing that did not burn after the bombing. This is the skull of Jesus. And when they went to grab the skull kind of separated into different parts. And now you see the cut over here, right? On the nose. It's because the artist hid there a prayer. And this prayer, which you see on the right side, says these words. I'm going to make it short. It says, Jesus, protect Lando, my family, and the whole humanity. And the whole humanity. Something that we forgot today. So, is this a medieval person you had in your mind? No, this is a guy that opened his mind and his heart to what was happening at that time. I am actually done, but I do hope that I contextualize the period, the 14th century. The plague stopped, obviously, this process. Siena had other beautiful moments of history, but I'm going to give now the word to Eugenio. Eugenio will entertain you more than I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto, for sort of setting the stage of these, many implications of being talking about Siena in the Middle Ages. I'm not a medievalist. I mean, there are medievalists in the room, and so I will try to stick to what I'm more familiar with in this case. It's really, I've been doing some work on the ways in which poetry and painting and images have been kind of interconnected in the history of medieval Siena. And of course, I hope that many of you have seen the exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum, which, they brought so many beautiful pieces, really, and it really gives you a sense of what the rise of painting was in Siena in the 14th century. But of course, if you go to Siena, you would be able to see a bunch of things which were basically unmovable, right? As you know, you go to the cathedral, you go to the Palazzo Pubblico, and there are things which cannot be brought to an exhibition. And this is the case with the painting I would like to begin with, which is Di Maestà in Trono by Simone Martini, which was painted in 1315. My brief account here begins with Simone Martini in 1315, and I will get to 1415 with another work of art from the same building, the Palazzo Pubblico. The reason why I'm bringing this up is mainly because it's not just a painting, but it's a piece of poetry. And this is sort of counterintuitive if you don't know the story of this painting, or if you haven't, had the chance to spend time in the room. If you get there, you would appreciate that on top of being a beautiful representation of the Virgin enthroned, this painting includes texts of various kinds. The most significant ones are legible, sort of down there, exactly where Roberto is pointing. There are 2 inscriptions, and of course, there are many inscriptions in all sorts of paintings in the Middle Ages, but what is fascinating about these particular inscriptions is that these are in Italian. 1315 is fairly early for the, development in a way of the vernacular as a literary language. And these are in poetry. These are poetical lines. And even more important, these lines are shaped in the kind of metrical form which Dante basically invented, the terza rima, the terzina, which is a series of stanzas of 3 lines connected through rhymes, through recurring rhymes. So basically we have here a kind of speech given by the Virgin herself. So the Virgin is talking to the angels and to the people of Siena, and she's talking about the importance, of basically being united. In a way, the message that the Virgin Mary is giving to the audience in the Palazzo Pubblico is more about the politics of the city than about spiritual matters. Of course, religion is there. Spiritual matters were crucial to everybody's life at the time, but Virgin Mary here is talking almost as the main patroness of the city, and she's really making a point about the importance of harmony. This might sound, to our postmodern ears kind of preposterous and gratuitous, but actually, it's not. And it's really a thread which runs through the Palazzo Pubblico, which, as I said, can be read as a piece of poetry. And in fact, if we move into the other room next door, and these are the paintings which we already got to see, and the other Roberto will talk a little bit about, even these paintings are both paintings and poetry. This is the cycle of the Buon Governo by Lorenzetti. I'm sure that many of you have seen it in person. It's a beautiful cycle made of 3 walls. This is the central piece, the allegory of the Buon Governo. There's a lot of text in this painting. You cannot probably see everything from this reproduction, but we have the names of the characters, allegorical personifications, justice, peace, the virtues, so on and so forth. We also have other important elements, which are in fact, again, pieces of poetry. If we turn to the effetti del buon governo, the effects of good government, again, we do see words written down here. Unfortunately, you can appreciate the position, right? It's sort of, there's a sentence running through the painting down there. It continues, as you can appreciate, under the countryside, and the same text continues even on the other side, where the effects of the bad government are represented. Once again, this is not just a text of sorts. This is a piece of poetry. Again, in the Italian vernacular. We are here just a few years after the Maestà di Simone Martini, is the 1330s, the late 1330s. And what is particularly fascinating is that all these bits and pieces of text, some of them are also appearing up in other spaces within the painting. All these bits of text are part of a canzone. So this is really a piece of poetry, a poem made of several stanzas illustrating themes of political harmony and also themes of political disharmony. So we have this very interesting way in which the painter has decided to include, of course, according to a specific iconographic program, a piece of poetry in the images, within the images. So I invite you to go back to Siena. These paintings are now under restoration, and appreciate the importance of these passages. Now, I will conclude my sort of short visit, virtual visit of the Palazzo Pubblico here with a couple of paintings which normally tourists don't really spend much time with. So, if you kind of transition from being tourists to being travelers, as Brian was sort of inviting us to do, you might want to spend some time in this room. This is the antechamber. It's basically the room just before getting into the main hall, La Sala del Mappamondo, where the Simone Martini painting is. We go a little further in time, 1413. This is a cycle of illustrious men. Painted by Taddeo di Bartolo. You can see down there, basically behind Paddy, that's fine. We have, 6 men. These are 6 virtuous men from classical antiquity, mostly from Roman history. Each of them has a text under the relevant figure in Latin, describing who they are. So of course, cultivated people were able to read Latin. We have 2 virtues on top of this wall, again with specific Latin descriptions. But we also have a very interesting text right sort of in between the 2 sets of virtuous men. I don't know whether you can read it from where you are, but that's in Italian. It's in Italian, it's not a piece of prose. Once again, it's a piece of poetry. We don't know who the author of this sonnet is. This is a sonnet, so it's a poem made of 14 lines. And basically, what this sonnet says in Italian to the bystanders, to the beholders, is, you know, you should mirror yourself, specchiatevi, right? Mirror yourself in the man down here, right? And basically the sonnet says, these are kind of examples of what it means to be virtuous and conducive to civic harmony. The Romans were good at it till they stayed united, right? As soon as the Romans sort of lost political union and harmony, the empire fell. And so in a way, the sonnet is kind of telling the people from Siena, you should mirror yourself in these people down here in order to privilege the importance of civic harmony. It's all about political harmony, which of course entail, as we were hearing earlier from Roberto, social justice of various sorts, very modern in a way. I like to conclude with this particular illustrious man who doesn't speak to us in the vernacular. Sorry, he speaks to us in Latin, but I've spent much time on this guy here, and I always like to kind of spend some time with him when I go to the Palazzo Pubblico. This is Aristotle. And he's meant to be the guy who's sort of overseeing the other virtuous men, because of course he's represented here as the one who came up with a set of virtues in the ethics which should be kind of reference for anybody who's involved with the administration of the city, but also with simply living as citizens within the community. He's speaking to us in Latin, as I said, again in poetry though. These are Latin hexameters, the kind of the language of Virgil. And what is also fascinating is that Aristotle is represented, with the costume of a university professor of the time. If we didn't know that this is Aristotle, we know that because he presents himself in the text, we would think, this is a professor. And you can see how, in a way, this beautiful moment in history is really merging past with present, and I would say kind of opening the door to whatever should come afterwards. And of course, I think this is a memento for the future, for our present, but also for our future. And I think this is one of the best lessons we can get from these sort of imbrications of poetry and painting in medieval Siena. Thank you. And I will turn the baton to Roberto.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Casa Italiana, for this opportunity. I immediately apologize for my English. It's not so good. It's a bit too similar to my Italian, but I have great passion about tourism. Siena is a small city, 50,000 inhabitants now, but it's a significant laboratory to analyze and understand the impact of tourism over time. Roberto and Eugenio have already introduced this fundamental work of art, the cycle of fresco, allegory, and effects of good and bad government, painted by Ambrogio Lorenzetti in 1338. It's also the first example, in my opinion, the most grandiose example of marketing, territorial marketing in the history, 6 centuries before the word marketing was invented. And as a modern marketing expert, Ambrogio Lorenzetti painted the USP, the unique selling proposition of Siena, harmony. The harmony is the real secret, the true secret of the beauty of Siena. And harmony between the government and the citizens, harmony between people, but above all, the harmony between palaces and churches, between the city and the countryside outside the walls, the harmony between the city and the countryside inside the walls, the so-called green valleys that are quite unusual in a city of middle age. And Siena is the ideal city of middle age chosen by UNESCO in the list of the heritage of the humanity. People love Siena. Every time I met a person and I said, I was born in Siena, the other person smiled. And, and we are so proud of that. But in a moment, please, because I need glasses. Okay. Okay. But we have a problem. Problem number one, someone argues. Millions of tourists spend in Siena only a few hours. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, half a day. And they walk along the main streets, visit the cathedral, the Duomo. The Duomo sells 2 million tickets a year in a city of 50,000 inhabitants. Maybe they take a photo or videos to post on social media, and then they leave. But in my opinion, this is not the problem number one. It's the problem number two. Because the problem number one is that tourist visitors leave Siena satisfied and happy. They are sure to have seen Siena. Indeed, they have seen only a small part of the beauty of Siena. And the fault is not of the tourist. I think that they aren't distracted or superficial modern tourists, and so. The fault is mine, the fault is ours, because we don't understand how to communicate to tourists all the things that there are to see, to do, to eat, to experience in Siena. Why? Because we don't want to understand how tourism and tourists and visitors have changed over the years. There is a wonderful description of a famous destination manager, Giuseppe Jarque, Spanish destination manager who has been working in Italy for many years, and I agree with him in this description of the change of the tourist's attitude. At the beginning, in the 60s and 70s of the 20th century, tourists are guests. When they visited a city of art, a museum, a church, a monument, an archaeological area, they felt like guests. They felt inadequate, strangers in someone else's home. And so they didn't have a special answer, special request. They faced this great beauty, and then it was enough for them. But then tourists become disciples. They come to a city like Siena, or they enter in a museum to learn. So they required a lot of information to learn something, to be better, to be better people after the visit. Yes, they were sitting behind a school desk. Then customers, they have bought a ticket. They want to see what they have paid for, so they require special services. they want services appropriate, they want information appropriate, they want opportunities to visit appropriate for the price they paid. Nowadays, they are creators. They are a king. They want to be the protagonists of their visit, the leading actors. They want to interact with the works of art, and each one want to have his own experience. And this is the goal of our project. It's our goal. We want to provide tourists who are creators and who want to be also travelers, information, opportunities, services to stay in Siena not a few hours, not half a day, but maybe 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and so they can really explore the beauty of Siena and the surrounding area. We want to offer specific information for any motivation of travel, religion, culture, food and wine, outdoor activities, so people can create the trip they desire, but thanks to our services, thanks to our information. And so they really can understand why Siena is the real heart of Tuscany. Thank you so much. Patti, it's your turn.
Thank you, Roberto. I absolutely love the way he characterizes each decade and the tourism themes of the decade. So, alrighty, I'm gonna start right in. Here we are. Hi, everyone. My name is Patty. And at this exact time, back in 2016, I had the incredible opportunity to study abroad in Siena for 4 months, taking an intensive language course and immersing myself in the city's culture. Today, I want to share how Siena's rich past and thoughtful present taught me lessons that transformed not only my time there, but also how I approach the world today. Now, I have to start with a story, because what's an American studying abroad without a few embarrassing mishaps? So picture this. It's my first day arriving in Siena. My parents and I, wide-eyed Americans, were driving our rental car on that very road Roberto was talking about from Rome to Siena. When we approached the city's gates that you saw in Brian's film, we looked around and we just excitedly hurried through. There we were, marveling at the beauty of the medieval streets, the calm of the city, and the suspicious lack of traffic. Oops. It wasn't until later on that it dawned on us why that was. We'd driven right into the city's walls. Completely illegal. Don't do that. But that moment set the tone for what Siena would teach me about moving through the world, with a bit more awareness, respect, and grace. Over the next few minutes, I'd love to share how Siena changed my life and why thoughtful exploration of places like this magical city can change yours too. When I first arrived in Siena, I wasn't just walking through its medieval streets. I was stepping into its story. During my program, we learned how Siena's rich art and history shaped its culture and how it continues to influence life there today. It moved me deeply to realize that every step I took echoed the footsteps of people who had walked those same streets for centuries. Travelers like me have marveled at Siena for the first time for hundreds of years, whether standing in awe at the Duomo or watching the light dance across Piazza del Campo. What struck me most was how Siena doesn't just preserve its history, it lives it. From the contrade communities to the traditions surrounding the Palio, we learned that every part of Siena's culture feels like a bridge between its past and present. And as a student visitor, I wasn't just observing it, I truly felt connected to it. Even today, Siena continues to draw people from all over the world. Even in my language courses, I met students from countries as far as Japan, Brazil, Egypt, and though we all came from different cultures, we shared one thing in common. We saw Siena as the place to learn Italian. Its charm, its pace, its authenticity made it the perfect environment to immerse ourselves in the language and culture. One of my favorite memories, One of my favorite memories was walking through Piazza del Campo at night. The piazza wasn't just a backdrop, it was alive, full of people from all walks of life. I saw fellow students chatting over a bottle of wine, families with young children laughing as they ran around, and the elders strolling arm in arm as if time did not exist. I realized that spaces like the piazza are more than just locations, they're the heart of the community. It struck me that in America, we don't really have these third spaces between home and work where people come together to just be. In Siena, the piazza reminds us that the community thrives when we prioritize connection over consumption. And that's a lesson I think the modern world could learn from Siena. The city thrives because it respects its roots and resources. This became really clear to me when I visited a local family-owned vineyard. Their winemaking methods had been preserved for generations, a tradition deeply tied to the land that they cultivated with care. Their approach wasn't just about producing or selling wine. It was about sustaining a way of life that respects both the past and the future. This same ethos can guide us as travelers. Thoughtful tourism isn't about consuming a place, it's about connecting with it. As a student, I tried to embrace Siena's culture rather than impose upon it. I'd chat with locals in my elementary Italian or simply wander the streets with no destination, allowing the city to reveal itself to me. But I found myself embraced not just by the city, but by its people as well. Every Thursday, I was welcomed into the home of Roberto and his lovely family, who became like an exchange family to me. Sharing meals at their table taught me about Sienese culture and the modern rhythms of life there. But even more than that, it made me feel at home, like I was truly a part of a family. You know, when I arrived in Siena, I was the definition of an anxious overplanner. I hate to admit it. I wanted to control every detail, every moment of my experience, but Siena had other plans. One of my most transformative lessons in Siena came from an unexpected challenge. One morning, after taking an Italian final, I went back to my flat to grab my wallet so that I could meet my other classmates out for an espresso and some sweets to celebrate our final. I was moving quickly, I wasn't really thinking, and I bumped into a wall, re-breaking a previously broken front tooth of mine. I was so immediately terrified. I was stressed out about what I would do next. How would I fix my tooth? Where would I fix my tooth? How expensive would it be? All of these things. And truly, it was like so horrific, I didn't leave my room. Half of my tooth was gone. It was not fun. So, you know, I was, within hours, my residence coordinator, Elena, just called her upstairs neighbor. He happened to be a dentist. Penciled me in that evening. He greeted me with such warmth. He immediately realized how terrified I was, and he said to me, "Don't worry, we're gonna fix that beautiful smile of yours." By the time I left his office, my tooth was repaired, my parents' anxious calls were calmed, and I had paid far less than I ever imagined. What struck me, though, was how easily this community rallied around me. A neighbor helping a neighbor. No insurance hoops, no bureaucracy. It was a moment that really changed everything for me. And these lessons didn't stay in Siena. They became a part of me. Learning to listen, to adapt, and to appreciate differences are skills that I brought back to America and use every single day. And they shaped how I view the global importance of cultural exchange and community. When we immerse ourselves in other places, like Siena, we gain something priceless. So again, when I first arrived in Siena, I was the wide-eyed, impatient American who accidentally and illegally drove into the city walls. But by the end of my time there, I had learned to slow down, to walk instead of rush, to live instead of plan. Siena's slower pace, deep and beautiful history, and community really changed me. I made lifelong friends, shout out to my friend Fausto, who's watching from Italy right now, and core memories. By the time I left, I was a more grounded version of myself, someone who could finally let go, live in the present, enjoy the past, and allow myself to feel joy. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists. Brian, I think your talk was your film. Right. So we have plenty to ask you about that. I really want to give our audience time for questions, although maybe I could just kick off with one question, which is that, is Siena exceptional or is Siena exemplary of what we would find in many other places in Italy?
So, is this on? Yeah. I think it is exemplary. And I think it is the heart of Tuscany. I encourage everyone, I don't know, but when I speak to people, have you ever had someone go, I'm going to Tuscany, where should I stay? And the first thing that comes to mind is Florence. Most people, that's where they're going to spend the 4, 5, 6 days. And I always say, think about Siena. You get so much more, not only for your money, which you do, but you get a real slice of Tuscan life there. And even when I went to a small town to study Italian, I wanted to be fully immersed in the culture. And I think that's why you went there as well. So I just think it's a perfect spot to branch off from and to really get a sense of everyday life as it should be.
Any other thoughts? I can share this.
Thank you. I would absolutely agree. I think at the time, when given the choice to study between Florence and Siena, a lot of people opted for Florence, which makes sense. It has, a wonderful reputation of being an incredible city. There's so much art and history there. But when I read about Siena, I was intrigued that it felt there was a bit of authenticity there that I felt that I couldn't get in other places. And I loved that the community was so surprising in the way that there are the different contrade communities and the different cultures within the city itself. I have been in multiple places throughout Italy in my life, and my family is from Sicily, and even my Sicilian family told me, go to Siena. It is one of the greatest places in Italy. So I always kept that with me, and I really recommend it for anyone who hasn't been there, although I feel like maybe many of you already have. I would seriously consider visiting.
I realize our 3 Sienese are being very shy about entering maybe because of the Florence-Siena rivalry.
We don't want to be biased, and everything negative about Florence is fine. No, I really truly believe that Italy is a mosaic. That's my answer. So I think that everybody is entitled to be proud of his community, as it should be in America. It should be everywhere. You should be proud of being part of a family. If you have a beautiful family, you have a beautiful society, and then you have a beautiful city and a beautiful community. But you need to open your mind, because traditions are nothing else than successful innovations. So we don't have to stay close inside these beautiful walls, but accept everything that comes from outside, like the people did in the 14th century. That's a necessity for a city like Siena and other communities.
Well, that's why the Lorenzetti is so important, right? You have the city and you have the Campagna, right? I mean, the sense of absolute balance and equality.
Yeah, today is the world. We needed to interact with the world. That's why we are here. We are travelers ourselves to come here to share what you probably already know, but I wanted to share my passion for it with you as well, not just informations in a way, because that's what we should do. We are, all of us, ambassadors of our own cultures. We have to remember that, especially when we travel and we get stressed about doing it.
Maybe one.
No. Many tourists often prefer Siena than Florence because in Siena there are less tourists. No, it's true. Over-tourism, overcrowding in cities like Florence, it's a real problem. In Siena, not yet. Maybe some days in the morning, because we have groups from cruises in a visit of an hour or 2 hours. But it's a real problem that local administration must face as soon as possible, because tourists are increasing. Every year, the number of tourists in the world grows 5, 6, 7%, and so it will be in 2030 is estimated 2 billion international tourists, and 2030 is tomorrow. It's tomorrow. So even in Siena, Roberto and me, we are try to explain local administration that if you need to rule tourism, and our project want to be a way to face over tourism, to modify the kind of tourists that will arrive in Siena.
No, it's a delicate balance. You want more tourists, and yet you don't. You just want the right kinds of tourists.
Well, I'm adding something to it. 17 years ago, I went to San Francisco to a grocery store, and I found a Tuscan salmon. We don't have salmons. So, I mean, everything is Tuscan. I went here to Brooklyn, and I went to a little sandwich place. Sure enough, I found a grilled Tuscan sandwich in Brooklyn. I mean, and there were no Italians, trust me. So the problem is when you become a brand and everybody wants a little piece of you, or a movie star comes and says, this is under the Tuscan sun, everybody has to have a little bit of under the Tuscan sun, or whatever, that becomes a problem. See what I'm saying?
Yes, just to say something about the fact that in a way, I think, and this is, I think, a conversation which, over the years we have had already, but, and even in that beautiful day out in the spring last year, the fact that Siena remains geographically a little isolated. I mean, the geography of the city is very important. What is fascinating is that the geography of the city didn't prevent in the Middle Ages this going through of pilgrims and travelers, which was quite impressive. But today, undoubtedly, when we compare Siena to other places, it's a place where, you have to be committed to get there. It's sort of out of the main highway, and it's 1.5 hours from Florence, even more, depending on which route do you take. So, I mean, you have to get there, and this is also the reason why it's been preserved, in a way, so much, and you get this combination of isolation but a richness of things, right? And this applies, of course, to the arts. I think the exhibit at the Met shows that extremely well, but if you go to Siena, you would, know that it really goes beyond the Middle Ages in a way. It's such a small place. It's kind of just a chest of gems, right? But then being isolated, it has remained somewhat exceptional, I think.
And that's all for the good, it seems like, from this conversation. I mean, I think one of the great things about the exhibit was that, which I how many of you saw the exhibit in this room? Oh my gosh! All right, we need to go to questions. But one of the things I like about Bravissimi, there was a lot of emphasis on Siena's contact with the world. Right, Avignon in France, the Silk Route, other cities in Italy. And I think that so it is this kind of paradox. It's a figlia della strada, as it's been called by historians. It's a daughter of the road, because the road shaped, as Roberto said, it really shaped the city, and yet it does have its own identity, and each contrada has its own identity in so many amazing ways. So the local and the global, really come together in what I have found in my own life, 40 years studying the city, just incredibly fascinating ways. I would love to turn it over to our audience. So I'm sure there are questions on our movie, which we haven't had a chance to talk about, as well as on the panel discussion that we've been having.
Easy questions, Good.
Hello, can you hear me? Well, I come from Venice, and we have in Venice, as the whole world knows, the opposite problem that Siena has. So we have so many tourists, we are trying to get them out, so we pushed all of them towards Siena. You have no idea how lucky you are that you have the authenticity of the town, because Siena is not a city, it's a town, and that's something precious to have. So good luck, and I will try to send all the people come to Venice to Siena.
Well, it's.
I would just like to second that. Of course, the ships are really bad. When I go to Venice, I don't even go to San Marco. I mean, the hordes are there. There's so many churches that don't even have an entrance fee that people don't go in and see, and they're wonderful things to see. Now, I also want to say I went to the Institute of Fine Arts of NYU as a graduate student, and I went to Italy, Florence, lived in Florence, and my artist was from Siena. At that time, the Ospedale was a hospital. Now it's a museum. And we're not talking now about, it's mass tourism now. That's the issue. You go and you're on a program. When I went and explored. I went into stores, I went into restaurants where there wasn't another English-speaking person. Now even the students come in big groups. They have people that look after them. They aren't exploring in an intimate way with the locals, and I think that's a huge difference. Tourism is now groups. It's not the individual. Sometimes there'll be a family and they'll investigate a little bit. I was in Bologna just this past year. I go to Italy several times a year. I don't want to say it. I don't want to say it. I was in a hotel where I didn't hear another word of English. They were Italian people on business or just a couple going. And then you go to Milan, of course, and everybody speaks English. And I told them in Italian, I'm in Italy. I don't want to hear English here. I know you speak it. I want to hear Italian when I'm here. But I think a big thing when you're talking about tourism, you're talking about groups. You can't control the groups. They have leaders. They're going to tell them what they should see. They miss all the intimate places, all the small little churches that are wonderful and make you feel part of the community, go into the pharmacy or whatever. So that's a big issue when you talk about tourism or you talk about college or going with a college. Still, you're being accompanied and you're not exploring in the way that the individual does. So tourism is like a bad word for me, sorry. It was such a different place.
Well, we will answer it.
So many piazzas in Italy have a church as well as the signoria. And in Siena, they're separate. Is there a story there? The Duomo's up the hill and the Campo is down the hill.
It was a compromise.
And what was the
compromise between the church and the secular power. Obviously, the two towers are the same height. The bell tower of the cathedral and the Torre del Mangia, the one on the city hall, are the same height. Anyway, you have to compromise. But consider that the Cathedral of Siena was almost totally paid by the Sienese. In front of it, we have the she-wolf and Romolo Remus as a symbol of the Republic of Siena. So our example was the Republic. What is the symbol of your country? Is the she-wolf with Romolo Remus? No. No. The symbol of America is the eagle. The eagle is the only bird that can look straight into the sunlight, the closest to God in pagan period. It's a symbol of the Roman Empire, not of the Republic. Siena wanted the Republic and placed it in front of the cathedral, and the money to build that beautiful jewel was coming from wax. Every Sienese left some wax at the end of the year to the monks, which were supervising the building of the cathedral. They were the Cistercians, amazing builders. That's why it's half Romantic, and then the other half is Gothic. And the wax was very important at the time because you were lighting in your rooms, everything with the candles. And so it's paid by bees, in a way. But the separation state of church is very important. Remember that when you saw the exhibit, so from the 13th century to 1350, is when the Pope was now in Rome. The Pope was in France, right? The Pope did not like the republics. He prohibited money lending. The Pope said money do not make money. And we took advantage of it. We did banking, right? You put your counter out, you exchange your money, you accept deposits. The counter is called banca. If you didn't have enough money to go back to the client, the courthouse of Siena would send a soldier with a big axe and would come and break the counter in two parts. Bankruptcy. If you go to San Francisco, you find Lombard Street. And Lombard Street is actually where the stock exchange center in London is. All the North Italians were called Lombards. They were the first to arrive there. They exchanged money. They accepted deposits. They loaned money to King Edward, to the Pope himself, because the aristocrats did not want to ask money, or the kings, to their own people. Otherwise, there would be lobbies against them. So the Sienese understood that. Now, if you go to San Francisco, you will find out in Lombard Street that an Italian, born in San Jose from Genovese parents, opened a counter during the Great Depression. And he exchanged money, but also he accepted deposit from the poor people, that they were afraid that somebody would steal money from their mattress. And so they gave him $2, $3 to him. He found the Bank of Italy of America, which today is Bank of America. He subsidized the Golden Bridge. He subsidized the railroad from Sacramento to Chicago by subsidizing the car into the woods in Virgin City, Nevada. See what I'm saying? History goes this way, not this way. See, you got ideas from the past and you create a new future. That's why I was telling you that traditions are nothing else than successful innovations. I hope I answered.
There was a question right here.
Thank you very much for the whole presentation. It's been fascinating. We were in Siena last spring, and it's spectacular. You didn't mention the head of Catherine, but that's another story, I suppose.
It's because St. Catherine convinced the Pope to come back. And we still have to forgive it. No, I'm just kidding. It's a joke, obviously.
One of the other, you mentioned Aristotle several times, but there is also in a mosaic on the floor in the Duomo.
That's Socrates.
Socrates. I knew it was one of the
It's
Greeks.
actually my favorite thing to show in the cathedral.
Yeah, it's extraordinary to be in a cathedral and to see Socrates on the...
As a martyr of justice.
But you alluded to the Romulus and Remus everywhere, and the she-wolf. I was surprised when we went to Siena to see it everywhere. Can you explain a little bit more how the she-wolf is the symbol of the city?
Because of the legend by Romulus and Remus that found Rome.
Yes,
So
but how does that get to Siena?
Because we were a republic, and we needed to have a symbol that represented the republic, which the only example we had was Rome. And by the way, everybody looked at Rome at that time. Even the emperors that were in Germany or everywhere, everybody was looking at Rome. Everybody wanted to be the emperor of the Roman Empire. Again, it was called the Holy Roman Empire. And the Pope said, no, I am the man that represents God to the earth. And the republics basically broke the feudal society. You know, in England, there were still kings. In France, they had the 100 years of war. Meanwhile, we were building city halls, cathedrals, and all that. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we had to have an example. The example was the Republic of Rome. Then Rome got Greece, right? And you may remember that George Washington was a Mason from a masonry called Cincinnati. And their dream is to have Alexander the Great Empire. That's what the dream of the Cincinnati Masonry. And so when Rome got the Greece, he had the idea. So why do we have the Republic? Let's have an empire. and they took the symbol of the eagle. See what I'm saying? And the Republic was put on the side at that point.
But there's another story, right?
Yeah.
Because Romulus kills the father of the two young boys who were nursed by this she-wolf.
Yeah, the legend. Yeah.
And they escape and create the basis for Siena. So it's interesting. I mean, I've always been a Mets fan, not a Yankees fan. I shouldn't say that in this company, but
people from
Siena's-
Boston here.
I love the underdog, and Siena's the underdog, and so I think the extent to which they cultivate this myth, where the underdog is the brother who's killed, right, who doesn't found Rome, but Remus's sons escape, and with the help of the she-wolf, they survive. They make it to Rome, and the comments on the hospital, which for me is one of the most fundamental buildings in all of Siena. I think Roberto put it exactly right. This is the first welfare system anywhere in the world at this point, in the early 1100s. Orphans, elderly people, pilgrims, the sick, you name it. They're there. They find a home. These are the two orphans who flee to Siena and become the kind of basis for this myth. And I think that's why the lupa, that's why the she-wolf who mothers them and takes them up after their father's death. Does that answer?
But
all of our
But that's the
answers answer your
legend.
question.
I told you the
legend.
historical part. I mean,
Sure.
that's
No,
the
no,
legend.
it works
That's-
together, right? Two and two.
One other point, if I may. We happened to be there on Liberation Day, and first of all, the city band came out in March. It was quite extraordinary. Oh, sorry. We were in Siena on Liberation Day, which we didn't know was a day. And, we learned this while we were there. But the campo was filled with people who were there to celebrate what Liberation Day means, and there were many speeches, and our Italian is not good, but we understood enough that this was a day to talk about the defeat of fascism, and it was very, very strong, vibrant mood in Siena that day, and I don't know if that's true of the city in general now, or but it was very, very palpable on that particular day last year.
Oh, that's great. Do we have time for one or two? One more question. All right. Is there someone right there? Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. I also learned and studied Italian in Siena. It has a very special place in my heart, and I would say it's extraordinary. So I just a real quick question to all of you. You took us from the Piazza Signorile to the Duomo, to Santa Maria della Scala, and that kind of tourist track. And I'm just wondering if some of you would be willing to share like a little secret, a little special place in the city that maybe wouldn't be on that track, that you think anyone who hasn't gone should just be aware of or see or to jot down.
That's a great question.
It's a wonderful question.
Well, I actually already mentioned that almost nobody goes to the hospital museum. The hospital museum is not just about the fresco describing how the hospital worked. It's an amazing layer of history, especially because a lot of people think the history is read just horizontally. When you go in Italy, it's a lasagna. No, you have layers, and more deeper you go, more you go into the old periods. And you find out that the people, when they couldn't have more space, they excavated underground and they found more roads, more space they needed. And so that's what I would like to suggest. Go to the hospital. Don't just go to see the fresco. Go to see the whole place. Is more than 80,000 square feet. I mean, it's a huge building. You can spend the whole day there. You see what I'm saying? And I tell my individual customers, yeah, great, the cathedral is amazing. Don't get me wrong, the city hall, everything. But just take your time. Take one more day to see one thing. Even when you went to the Met, it's a beautiful exhibit. We love it. But you have 5 minutes to look at a painting that the painter took 2 years to paint. No, honestly, how much can you absorb? You see what I'm saying? A museum, as beautiful as they are not contextualized. When you go in a building and you see the art and you see everything where it's contextualized, that's when you have the experience. That's when you really absorb what the artist wanted to show you. After all, it was all kind of propaganda in a way. Like today we see commercials, we see everything. At the time, the people could not write and read like we do, and often they didn't speak your language. So the universal language was art, which I hope will be still today.
Other favorite places?
Places. I mean, I think I have a couple of. Something which people don't think about when they visit Siena is that, of course, we think about Siena as a medieval city. A little sparkle of Renaissance, you can find that, but nobody thinks about Siena as a place for the Baroque, and there are some Baroque gems. A couple of churches, extremely beautiful. Some of them are kind of hidden. You have to go there. They're kind of, either off the beaten path or visible and there, but just off the kind of trajectory which scholars, and I'm sorry, that's a nice lapsus, which tourists go for. So I think the kind of the hidden Baroque gems of Siena is something which I'm very passionate about.
Provenzano.
Yes.
No. A short answer about Venice. Venice have decided not to reduce tourists, but make money with tourists, with an entrance fee. And Rome, too. It's not the solution you prefer. It's a real problem. City administrations say that they want to rule tourism, but in Italy they prefer to make money. And the fee entrance, it's not a good way to reduce tourists, because everyone can pay €5, $5, €10 to visit Venice or Rome. So in Siena, we prefer to follow a different way. Until now, the tourist tax in Siena is quite low, €2 or €3 per person, but I'm not sure that in future the tourist tax or fee entrance will arrive also in Siena. I hope no.
Okay, I just reached back into my mind years ago, and I don't have a specific spot I could tell you the street names, but we would always go at sunset because you know how it's really hilly in Siena, and I believe it was in the Chiocciola Contrada, and it was all the way at the edge, and you're at the wall. I don't know what street, I don't know where we were. We would go to this one spot, and you watch the sunset across all the Campagna. It was stunning, and this just brought me back, and I loved hearing your comment because it truly it was a spot that we loved it, but we didn't know even exactly where we were, and we would just watch the sunset. So yeah.
Jane, do you have a spot?
Well, Brian, you have a special spot.
No, go ahead.
Okay, you asked about secret places. I'll just say I wrote a book called Siena City of Secrets. The big secret is where to park for free. No, I think my favorite spot in some ways, and it's a place where hardly anyone goes, is the church I mentioned in my very brief introduction of Eugenio, the Santa Maria dei Servi Church, which is at one of the southernmost ends of the city. You get an extraordinary view of the entire panorama of Siena from there because it's high up. There's wonderful hills in Siena, and just some of the most remarkable works of art I've seen. And there's never anyone in there until all of you go, which will also be very welcoming and great. Brian, you opened our evening, and it would be totally appropriate for you to close it. We'd love to hear your secret of Siena.
I just, we've seen, we met the people, and that's really what it came down to for me. When Roberto was my guide, and when we met Franco and Franca in Siena on the saffron farm, it was so personal. And I was in the kitchen, and I was getting my hands dirty, as the Brunello winemaker said. I was doing all these things. I was experiencing the different levels of the culture. And to me, that was a school on wheels, for lack of better words. I was just absorbing like a sponge everything there. And we came up with the idea, the opening scene of the film was sheep. And it was great seeing it on a big screen because all their heads are down, as sheep do, and they follow each other, like tourists. No, really, think about it.
That's bad.
And that was actually the very first day I was there. We shot that from Roberto's backyard. It was raining, and that branch is going back and forth. I'm in his kitchen with the screen door open, the rain coming down, shooting that with my camera. And Roberto and I were saying, that's what tourists do. You know, so that was sort of the feeling that we had was in life, not just when you travel, but in life. Are you a tourist or a travel? How do you live your life? What do you move outside of fear? Do you explore new things? Kafafi wrote a beautiful poem called Ithaca. If you're not familiar with it, it's talking about, it's not about the destination, it's about absorbing as much as you can on the way. And you'll never be cheated, ever, if you have the experience of the journey. And that's what we were really trying to say here is, in life, are you a tourist or are you a traveler? Because you just might be pleasantly surprised beyond your expectations.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate all of you being here tonight. Thanks so much to all our panelists. And we look forward to carrying on this conversation, ideally in Siena. So thanks again.